Rent just hit a number that feels illegal, but somehow it's still legal. That's the world now. Paycheck sweating, rent laughing. Because if everything's up and to the right, something has to give. And spoiler, it's usually us. So I went looking for the places that didn't get the memo. 10 American cities where life is still manageable, surprisingly. What nobody tells you is why these cities stayed cheap. Until they didn't. One of them spends less than 15% of income on rent. Another looks boring until it isn't. Think you know which states made the list? Prove it. Like the video if rent has personally offended you. Subscribe, not because it's fun, but because it's survival. Wait till you see number 1. Let's break it down. Number 10. Salina, Kansas. If I told you there's a US city where rent is cheaper than your car payment and nobody's fighting over it, you'd assume something's wrong. But then there's Salina, Kansas. Salina looks like a place time politely stepped around. Flat land, big sky, grain elevators that feel like modern art if you squint hard enough. From the outside, it reads flyover. Safe. Predictable, quiet in a way that makes coastal people nervous. The expectation is simple, cheap because there's nothing happening. And sure, no hype train, no skyline flex, no $9 oat milk lattes yelling at you for existing. But that's not the whole story, not even close. Here's where Salina quietly embarrasses louder cities. Cost of living, roughly 20 to 25% below the US average. Housing does most of the heavy lifting. Median rent, around $700 to $800 for a one-bedroom. Yes, in America, in this decade. Home prices. Median home values often land under $200,000, which now qualifies as a jump scare. Crime. Violent crime sits below the national average. Property crime exists, but it's more missing lawn chair than true crime podcast. Jobs. Logistics, manufacturing, healthcare, and regional distribution centers. It's not glamorous, but unemployment tends to hover below national averages. Surprisingly, Salina isn't shrinking the way people assume. It's stable. That's the magic trick. No boom, no bust, just functional. And what nobody tells you is stability is rare now. Cities either explode in price or hollow out. Salina just stays. Here's the part nobody markets. Living in Salina buys you margin, money margin, time margin, mental margin. You're not grinding just to exist. You're not negotiating with your bank account every time you order takeout. You can mess up a little here. That's huge. But then there's the trade. Salina doesn't chase you. You have to bring your own ambition, your own community, your own spark. If you're waiting for the city to entertain you, you'll get bored fast. If you're building something, career, family, peace of mind, it quietly gets out of your way. That's the tension. Cheap doesn't mean easy. It means unforgivingly honest. Yeah, it's affordable, but if you hate wind, silence, or seeing the same 3 intersections every week, Salina will test your character. Can we talk about Kansas wind for a second? It's not a breeze, it's an opinion. You'll be walking normally and suddenly nature's like, no. Hats? Gone. Hair? Negotiating surrender. And nobody complains. They just lean forward slightly and keep living. That's the vibe here. The wind isn't annoying. It's a personality test. Salina isn't cheap because it failed. It's cheap because it never played the game everyone else lost. No speculative housing bubble, no influencer invasion, no up-and-coming tax. Just affordability hiding in plain sight, for now. Because here's the quiet truth. Places like this don't stay invisible forever. And if you think Salina is quietly affordable, wait until you see the next city. Because it's cheap for a reason nobody likes to talk about. Number 9. Decatur, Illinois. Decatur is one of the cheapest cities in America, and that's not an accident. It's a consequence. Decatur has a reputation that walks in before it does. Old factories, Midwest gray, a town people left before you ever thought about arriving. It feels like a place stuck between used to matter and still here anyway. Lifestyle-wise, slow, functional, unpretentious to the point of defiance. No one's pretending this is the next anything. And weirdly, that honesty is refreshing. Here's why Decatur keeps popping up in affordability charts. Cost of living, roughly 30% below the national average. That's not a typo. Median rent, around $650 to $750 for a one-bedroom. Less if you're not picky. Home prices. Median homes often sit under $120,000. Starter homes still exist here. Crime. Higher than average property crime. Violent crime closer to national norms, but concentrated, not everywhere. Jobs. Healthcare. Agribusiness. Manufacturing. ADM still anchors the economy, for better and worse. Surprisingly, Decatur didn't collapse. It compressed. Population dropped. Prices followed. And what nobody tells you is, That reset created breathing room most cities lost decades ago. Yeah, it's cheap. That's what happens when Zillow isn't emotionally unstable. Living in Decatur changes your math. You're not house poor. You're not rent anxious. You're not planning your life around your landlord's mood. But then comes the trade-off. Opportunity isn't loud here. You have to look for it. And if you need constant stimulation, new restaurants, new faces, new buzz, you might feel the quiet closing in. Decatur rewards people who want control, not clout. If your goal is stability, saving money, or rebuilding after getting financially body-checked by a bigger city, this place makes a brutal kind of sense. It's not aspirational, it's practical. And right now, that's rare. Let's talk about Decatur winters. They're not cold, they're committed. Wind that feels personal. Skies that haven't smiled since 2009. You don't bundle up, you prepare emotionally. But the locals? Unbothered. They'll be scraping ice off their windshield like, yeah, this is fine. Affordable living comes with seasonal character development. Real question, be honest, would you trade nightlife for cheap rent? Yes or no? Defend yourself in the comments. Decatur isn't cheap because it's trendy. It's cheap because it already went through the hard part. The decline already happened. The prices already fell. What's left is a city that works, quietly, imperfectly, and without asking permission. Number 8. Muskogee, Oklahoma. Muskogee is cheap, but not in the way you think. Therefore, it scares off the wrong people and quietly rewards the right ones. Say Muskogee, and people picture a punchline before a place. Small, old school, slightly frozen in time. A town you pass through, not move to. Life here feels slower than the internet wants it to be. Porch conversations still happen. So do long pauses. The expectation? Cheap because it's fading. That's the setup. Now let's break it. Here's why Muskogee keeps sneaking onto affordability lists. Cost of living, roughly 25 to 30% below the national average. Housing does most of the damage, in a good way. Median rent, around $650 to $750 for a one-bedroom. Houses with yards rent for what studios cost elsewhere. Home prices. Median homes often sit under $150,000. Some under $120,000 if you don't need Instagram ceilings. Crime. Property crime is higher than average. Violent crime exists, but is neighborhood-specific, not citywide chaos. Jobs. Healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, and regional services. Not flashy, but steady. Surprisingly, Muskogee isn't dying. It's thinning. Population dipped, prices followed, pressure released. And what nobody tells you is that pressure relief is why some people here are actually relaxed. Yeah, it's affordable. Turns out when nobody's speculating on your house like it's crypto, prices stay normal. Living in Muskogee gives you room to breathe, financially and mentally. You're not sprinting just to stay housed. You can save. You can pause. You can plan. That alone rewires your nervous system. But then comes the catch. Muskogee doesn't chase momentum. If you need validation, constant novelty, or a city to hype you up, this ain't it. You have to bring your own forward motion, your own projects, your own reasons. Muskogee isn't cheap because it's broken. It's cheap because it stopped auditioning. Quick stat, hard stop. In some neighborhoods, your rent is less than the national average car payment. Pause. Yeah, sit with that. Let's talk about Muskogee humidity. It doesn't show up, it arrives. You walk outside and suddenly your clothes are participating in the environment. Everything sticks. Hair gives up. Locals? Completely unbothered. They'll say, it's not that bad, while visibly melting. Affordable living, but nature charges a small inconvenience fee. Remember the Kansas wind earlier? Yeah. Muskogee said, cool story, here's moisture. Muskogee is a filter. It repels people chasing vibes and attracts people chasing margin. Cheap rent isn't the headline, control is. And once you feel that, it's hard to unfeel. Number 7. Ponca City, Oklahoma. Ponca City is cheap because it already survived its boom. Most cities don't get that far. Ponca City feels like a place built for permanence, not popularity. Tree-lined streets, old money architecture, oil-era confidence that never quite left, even when the money did. People expect decline, or at least stagnation. A town that peaked decades ago and forgot to update the brochure. But the lifestyle here doesn't feel abandoned. It feels settled, on purpose. Ponca City's affordability isn't random, it's structural. Cost of living, roughly 25 to 30% below the national average. Housing carries most of the weight. Median rent, around $600 to $700 for a one-bedroom. Houses with garages still rent under $1,000. Home prices. Median home values often land around $120,000. Some neighborhoods feel underpriced on principle. Crime. Violent crime sits below the national average. Property crime exists, but it's relatively contained. Jobs. Energy, healthcare, manufacturing, education. Phillips 66 still anchors the local economy, quietly, reliably. Surprisingly, Ponca City is safer than many larger, louder cities with triple the rent. And what nobody tells you is safety plus affordability is a rare pairing now. Apparently, the secret to low rent is not marketing yourself as the next big thing. Living in Ponca City changes the tempo. You stop racing the clock. You stop bracing for the next bill. You start thinking in years instead of months. The trade-off? This place won't distract you from yourself. If you're restless, you'll feel it. If you're focused, you'll thrive. Here's the wild contrast. You can walk alone at night in parts of Ponca City where people in higher rent cities wouldn't even roll down their windows in daylight. Cheap and calm rarely coexist, but here they do. That's not exciting. That's powerful. Ponca City closes early. Not kind of early, emotionally early. You'll check the clock at 8:30 p.m. like, I could eat. And the city's like, you should have planned that. It forces discipline, or fasting. Affordable living, but the nightlife runs on banker hours. Ponca City isn't cheap because it's broken. It's cheap because it was built once, properly, and never needed to chase trends. No hype cycles, no speculative chaos. Just a city that works, quietly, while everyone else argues about rent. Number 6, McAllen-Edinburg-Mission, Texas. This is one of the fastest growing metros in Texas, and one of the cheapest places to live in America. Yeah, that sentence isn't supposed to work, but here we are. McAllen-Edinburg-Mission lives in a weird limbo. Border town, hot, flat, misunderstood. A place people assume is either dangerous, struggling, or temporary. The lifestyle expectation? Cheap, sure, but at a cost. Limited jobs, limited safety, limited future. That's the myth. Now let's ruin it. Here's what actually keeps this place on affordability lists year after year. Cost of living, roughly 20 to 25% below the national average. Not just housing, everything. Median rent, around $750 to $900 for a one-bedroom, often newer builds. Groceries and utilities, among the cheapest in the country. Food costs here are doing charity work. Crime. Violent crime rates are lower than most major Texas metros. The reputation hasn't updated. Jobs. Healthcare, education, logistics, cross-border trade. Not flashy, but expanding. Surprisingly, this metro keeps growing because people stay. And what nobody tells you is affordability plus population growth is a rare combo that usually doesn't last long. Turns out when tacos are cheap and rent doesn't hate you, people settle in. Living here buys you economic forgiveness. You're not crushed by basics. You're not rationing joy. You can live, not just survive. But then, reality check. The heat is relentless. Summer isn't a season, it's a lifestyle negotiation. And culturally, you're in a blended world. English, Spanish, border rhythm, family-first values. If you're adaptable, it's rich. If you're rigid, it's uncomfortable. McAllen-Edinburg-Mission rewards people who can live between lanes. That's the real filter. Let's talk about South Texas heat. This isn't bring water heat. This is your steering wheel has opinions heat. You don't walk anywhere, you plan. Shade becomes a currency. A C isn't optional, it's infrastructure. Affordable living, but the sun clocks in every day like it's got bills to pay. Picture this. You wake up, warm air, palm trees barely moving. You grab breakfast tacos for pocket change. No rent panic, no financial jump scare, just quiet math that finally works in your favor. That's the appeal. McAllen-Edinburg-Mission isn't cheap because it's behind. It's cheap because it operates on a different economic rhythm, one most Americans forgot existed, for now. Number 5, Richmond, Indiana. Richmond is what happens when a town quietly fixes its math while everyone else argues about vibes. Richmond sits right on the Indiana-Ohio line, which already tells you something. It's a border town, not flashy enough to brag, not broken enough to panic. People expect Rust Belt leftovers, a place that used to build things and now just remembers them. Lifestyle-wise, calm, functional, blue-collar polite, the kind of town that doesn't interrupt you while you're thinking. Here's why Richmond keeps showing up in affordability rankings. Cost of living, roughly 25 to 30% below the national average. Housing leads the charge. Median rent, around $650 to $800 for a one-bedroom. Two bedrooms under $1,000 are normal. Home prices. Median homes often land under $130,000. Not a typo. Crime. Property crime is above average, but violent crime is lower than many similarly priced cities. Jobs, manufacturing, healthcare, logistics, and education. It's not trendy, but it's steady. Surprisingly, Richmond benefits from location. You're about an hour from Indianapolis, Dayton, and Cincinnati. And what nobody tells you is proximity without pricing pressure is a rare sweet spot. Turns out being near everything, but not in it, does wonders for your rent. Living in Richmond lowers the volume. You're not fighting traffic. You're not fighting rent. You're not fighting time. That space does something to people. You either grow or get restless. Here's the contrast that sneaks up on you. You can feel safer walking at night here than in cities charging double the rent, and somehow that feels illegal. Richmond doesn't sell excitement. It sells predictability, which right now is underrated. Richmond closes early and commits to it. You'll think, I'll grab food later, and the city's like, no, you won't. After 9 p.m., your options are gas stations and personal growth. It's not inconvenient, it's character building, affordable living, but you learn to plan like an adult. Picture this: evening, quiet street, porch lights on, no sirens, no rent anxiety. You're checking your bank account and not wincing. That's the Richmond flex. It's wild that a city where people leave doors unlocked can cost less than cities where people double-check their mirrors at stoplights. Be honest, yes or no? Would you trade nightlife for lower stress and cheaper rent? Richmond isn't cheap because it's forgotten. It's cheap because it chose balance over hype. No boom, no bust. Just a town that works quietly while everyone else overcomplicates things. And if Richmond feels almost too calm, the next city proves affordability doesn't always whisper. Sometimes it shows up loud and unapologetic. Number 4. Wichita, Kansas. Wichita looks boring on a map, but it quietly outperforms cities twice its size. Therefore, it keeps winning without anyone noticing. Wichita's reputation is aggressively unsexy, flat, windy, practical. A city people fly over, not to. The lifestyle expectation? A big town pretending to be a small city. Manufacturing roots, Midwest manners, zero drama. And that's exactly why it works. Here's what Wichita quietly brings to the table. Cost of living, about 20 to 25% below the national average. Housing and utilities do the heavy lifting. Median rent, roughly $800 to $950 for a one-bedroom. Newer builds still show up under $1,000. Home prices. Median homes often sit around $160,000 to $180,000. For a metro this size, that's rare. Crime. Property crime is above average, but violent crime is lower than many similarly sized metros. Jobs. Aerospace, manufacturing, healthcare, logistics. Wichita builds things that actually exist. Surprisingly, this city has one of the most diversified job bases in the region. And what nobody tells you is economic diversity is what keeps rent from losing its mind. Turns out, when a city makes planes instead of promises, the math holds up. Wichita is a volume knob city. You turn life down just enough to hear yourself think. Commutes shrink, bills relax, weekends stop feeling like recovery time. Here's the trade. You won't get constant novelty, but you'll get consistency. And consistency compounds. Wichita doesn't exhaust you, it funds you. Let's talk about Wichita Wind. It doesn't visit, it arrives with purpose. Trash cans migrate. Hair loses all authority. Some days you're not walking, you're negotiating. Affordable living, but the atmosphere has opinions. Picture it. Wide streets, quiet neighborhoods. You're driving home in 10 minutes, not 40. Bills are paid. Rent didn't jump overnight. You've got room in your budget and your head. That calm, backed by numbers, not wishful thinking. Wichita isn't affordable by accident. It's affordable because it produces, diversifies, and refuses to cosplay as something it's not. No hype tax, no chaos fee, just a city that works. And if Wichita feels like the biggest city on the list so far, the next one flips the script by being even cheaper, and somehow even quieter. Number 3. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Oklahoma City is what happens when a big city never learns how to be expensive, and somehow keeps getting away with it. OKC used to be a punchline. Flyover, oil money, flat, forgettable. Now, it's quietly one of the fastest growing metros in the country, and still cheaper than cities with half the ambition. The lifestyle expectation is confused. Is it a small town pretending to be big, or a big city pretending not to care? Answer, yes. Here's why Oklahoma City lands this high. Cost of living, about 15 to 20% below the national average. For a legit metro, that's rare. Median rent, roughly $900 to $1,100 for a one-bedroom. Still survivable, still real. Home prices, Median homes hover around $200,000 to $230,000, cheap for the size. Crime. Property crime is higher than average. Violent crime varies sharply by neighborhood. You choose wisely here. Jobs. Energy, healthcare, aviation, logistics, and a growing tech scene. Actual opportunity, not vibes. Surprisingly, OKC keeps adding people without detonating prices. And what nobody tells you is sprawl is doing the heavy lifting. Space keeps things sane. Turns out when your city has room to breathe, rent doesn't panic by itself. Living in OKC feels like cheating the system. You get sports teams, food scenes, museums, districts, actual nightlife. But then comes the reality check. This city is wide. You don't walk places, you commit. And socially, OKC rewards people who show up. If you engage, it gives back. If you don't, it lets you disappear comfortably. Affordable doesn't mean boring here. It means optional. Let's talk about OKC weather. You'll experience all 4 seasons before lunch. Sunny, windy, storm warning, apology sunshine. Your phone becomes a weather negotiation device. Affordable living, but Mother Nature refuses to commit to a personality. Oklahoma City is big enough to matter and cheap enough to breathe. That combination usually self-destructs. So far, it hasn't, and that's the tension. And if you think OKC is the sweet spot, the next city proves affordability can survive even closer to the edge. Number 2. Tupelo, Mississippi. Tupelo is cheap in a way that feels almost suspicious, like you're missing a catch. Spoiler, the catch already happened. Most people know Tupelo for one thing: music history, a famous birth certificate, then silence. The expectation is a small southern town living off nostalgia, quiet, slow, probably struggling. But living here doesn't feel frozen. It feels contained, like the chaos just never arrived. Here's why Tupelo quietly punches above its weight. Cost of living, roughly 30% below the national average, one of the lowest on this list. Median rent, around $700 to $850 for a one-bedroom. Houses under $1,000 are still real. Home prices. Median homes hover near $150,000, and that's after recent run-ups. Crime. Violent crime sits below the national average. Property crime exists, but isn't dominant. Jobs. Healthcare, manufacturing, furniture, logistics, regional hub energy without regional hub prices. Surprisingly, Tupelo's economy is steadier than towns twice its size. And what nobody tells you is stability is the secret ingredient to staying cheap. Turns out when a city isn't auditioning for next hot destination, rent stays humble. Tupelo recalibrates your nervous system. Bills don't stalk you. Commutes don't test your morals. You stop planning your life around expenses. But then, honesty check. If you need constant novelty, this place will feel small fast. Tupelo rewards roots, not restlessness. And that's the trade. Security over stimulation. Quick reset. Median rent here is lower than what some cities charge just to park. Okay, continue. Mississippi humidity is not weather. It's a personality trait. You don't step outside, you enter. Everything sticks. Shirts, surrender. Locals, immune. They'll tell you, you get used to it, which is Southern for we stopped fighting. Affordable living, but the air wants a hug. Remember that OKC weather mood swing? Yeah, Tupelo just commits to one feeling and holds eye contact. Tupelo isn't cheap because it's broken. It's cheap because it's finished. Infrastructure's built. Costs are low. The drama already passed through. That's rare. And if Tupelo feels like the quiet winner, the #1 city proves affordability can survive even under pressure. For now. Number 1. Bismarck, North Dakota. 10 years from now, people will ask how Bismarck stayed cheap this long, and the locals will just shrug. Bismarck sounds like a dare. Cold, remote, government town energy. A place you assume is affordable because who's rushing there? Lifestyle expectations are low-key stoic. Work, home, quiet wins. No chaos, no hype, no pretending. And that's the misdirection. Bismarck isn't cheap by accident. It's cheap by design. Cost of living, about 20 to 25% below the national average. Stable, not fragile. Median rent, roughly $850 to $1,000 for a one-bedroom, for a state capital. Home prices. Median homes hover around $260,000, but wages here actually keep up. Crime. Violent crime is well below the national average. Property crime is modest. Jobs. State government, healthcare, energy, education. Recession-resistant work. Surprisingly, Bismarck's unemployment rate is often below the national average. And what nobody tells you is, stability is the ultimate affordability cheat code. Turns out when your economy isn't built on vibes, it holds up. Bismarck gives you something rare: predictability. Bills don't jump you in the dark. Commutes don't steal your soul. You plan your life like an adult again. The trade-off? Winter isn't a season, it's a contract. You either respect it or you move. But here's the thing. When the world gets noisy, Bismarck stays boring. And boring starts to feel luxurious. Let's talk about North Dakota cold. This isn't put on a jacket cold. This is your car needs emotional support cold. You don't check the weather, you negotiate with it. Affordable living, but winter wants commitment and references. Picture it. Quiet streets, clean air, no sirens. You wake up, coffee hits, bills are paid. No rent panic, no financial jump scare, just space, mental and literal. That calm, backed by numbers. I saw this online from a local. It's not exciting, but my stress level dropped by half and my bank account noticed. Hard to argue with that. Bismarck isn't trying to win, it's trying to last. Low crime, stable jobs, affordable living that doesn't feel temporary. That's why it's #1, for now. Like the video if you enjoy cities that don't emotionally manipulate your rent. Subscribe if you want future-proof living tips, or if this channel accidentally became a financial survival guide.